Hello and welcome to Digital Times News Report. Today we bring you updates from the recently held Ghana Internet Governance Forum, where stakeholders were gathered together to speak about digital inclusion. We had the privilege to speak to Honorable Member of Parliament, Honorable Sam George, where we inquired about the state of the use of PDAs in educational institutions currently in Ghana. Here's what he had to say.
Well, I think that COVID has accelerated what would have been a long time coming. However, with COVID and with the fact that now we have what we call blended learning, the use of both in classroom and online learning, it's come to stay. Even though kids will return to school, you realize that a lot more of the work they will do will be driven on PDAs and will be driven online. And so I think that it's a critical milestone where we've gotten to. But what we now need to have is the regulation to protect our kids, to ensure that these kids do not become subject to pedophiles online and the wrong kind of content online. So in managing the content online that our kids are increasingly getting exposed to, it's a critical thing that's going to be a network between or collaboration between the Cybersecurity Authority, the Data Protection Commission, and the ministry as a whole on the policy framework. You know, we've got the online child protection program of the ministry at this point in time. How do we deepen it? How do we entrench it? And how do we ensure that a good thing, which is online learning, doesn't become a vice that exposes our kids to unnecessary challenges?
After sharing a lot of insight around the use of PDAs, we further inquired to know what the position of Parliament is on policies and regulation that accelerate digital inclusion as it affects the Ghanaian society.
Well, where Ghana sits today is very good. On legislation, I think that we're solid. We have the requisite legislative framework to give the agencies what it needs to work. However, I think what we need to do is to keep reviewing these policies, because the challenges are growing with each passing day. There are new threats every day. So you have a policy that was spot on 2 years ago. This year, it's no longer valid. So take, for example, the child online protection policy that was put together. It was put together in 2014, I believe. There was a review in 2019. However, with what COVID has done and the exposure of kids today, the exposure of kids under 18 or under 12 to online resource in 2014, when the child online policy was launched, is completely different today. And so we need to keep having those reviews, systematic reviews from the policy position, which is at the ministry, and then from Parliament, to ensure that we have a very strong and robust framework. One of the things Parliament has done in the area of protecting our kids is the ratification of the Malabo Convention and the Budapest Convention, because especially the Budapest Convention is very strong on child protections, children pornography, exposing children to pornography, and then trying to groom kids. And so once we've ratified them in Ghana's Parliament, we've domesticated those laws, and so now we're able to actually, through the focal persons and the Glacy Plus project, go after persons who are even outside the jurisdiction of Ghana, who are engaged in this kind of activities that are inimical to the well-being of our kids.
And finally, Honorable Sam George speaks to us about access to devices. What can be done for the rural and underserved communities to attain digital inclusion?
Now, that's a very big question. The issue of access to devices is a major challenge. I mean, it's capital intensive. National economies have been wrecked by COVID, and so it's not necessarily the best place to begin to roll out heavy funding. And so we're minded by this. However, it's going to be a critical thing a government has to look at. Do we begin to do the assembly of these devices locally? Will that drop the cost of the assembly of these devices, or the cost of the devices, if we assemble them locally, so that we are able to channel these resources into communities that are underserved and not served? Because the bottom line is the kids in the underserved and unserved communities will write and sit the same exams as those in the served communities. So it's important that we find a fine balance. Yes, some funds and resources have to be looked at. I know that GIFEC, which is Ghana's Universal Access Fund, is doing some work in that direction. We're hoping that we can accelerate. This will be an appeal to the telcos, the MNOs. I know that you're doing so much already for GIFEC and the Universal Access Fund. Currently, they I think they contribute 1% of their net revenue to GIFEC. Would they want to look at making it 1.5 or 2% so that we're able to do more in these underserved communities? I mean, it could be for a 2-year period, and this is my suggestion to the telcos, the MNOs. You've made quite some windfall during COVID, because that's one of the industries that made some good revenue. Could we channel this back in ensuring that we put some of those windfall revenues into the underserved and unserved communities?
Great, thank you.
Pleasure's mine.
For more relevant information, do well to visit www.digitaltimes.africa.